Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, where today we're going to be taking a look at the Chinese pistol, sort of, because this gun has shown up quite a lot throughout the Fallout series. It's shown up in a lot of things, really, and we're going to be talking about it, what it's based on, where it came from, and how good it was in the old games and how good it is in the current games. So the Chinese pistol, or the 9mm Mauser in this case, is based off of the Mauser C96 pistol, also known as the broom handle. This was one of the very first semi-automatic pistols that was ever created in the world. It was actually made in 1896, hence the 96 on it. So it is a very, very old gun, and it was actually the very first semi-automatic pistol that was adopted into any military, mostly because it could actually fire a pretty big round compared to a lot of the semi-automatic handguns of the time. It wasn't technically the first semi-automatic handgun, but you could argue that it was the first military one. So, and it was also one of the more longer lasting semi-automatic handguns as well. It being 9mm and being called like the Chinese pistol is not really incorrect for it being part of like the real world, because there was actually a ton of these that were converted to be 9mm once that became a more common round. It was originally chambered in 7.63 by 25 Mauser, so a bit smaller diameter, but a bit longer overall. And it was a German-made pistol originally, but it was made pretty much everywhere in the world, especially in China for a very long time. So this being like the Chinese pistol wouldn't really be inaccurate to it. I don't know why the Chinese are using like the C96 pistol in the world of Fallout, given the time period. But whatever, it's a cool gun. I like that it's in the game, so there's a little lesson there. Anyway, the 9mm Mauser would first show up in Fallout 1. This was Gizmo's signature weapon. It was the second pistol that you could get. First one you got was the iconic 10mm pistol, the first version of it, and then you could get this one. This one was the only gun that used the 9mm cartridge, which was interesting, and I think there was a very limited amount of bullets for this. This weirdly enough held like 7 rounds, which I don't know why it would. Most Mausers would hold like 10 or more rounds, but whatever. This one did have low requirements overall in Fallout 1, actually the same requirements as the 10mm pistol, and sadly it would get compared to the 10mm pistol quite a bit, because 10mm was way more common. It actually had different bullets too that you could load into the gun, and it just did better damage and had better range. The 9mm Mauser did 5 to 10 damage, whereas the 10mm did 5 to 12 damage. So there was just a higher chance of hitting harder with that gun over the Mauser. The only advantage the Mauser really had was that it used less action points, which was kind of cool, but since you got a very limited amount of bullets for this gun in Fallout 1, it had a very short shelf life overall, and would be abandoned pretty quickly on. I don't think you could buy 9mm anywhere else, at least I didn't notice that in Fallout 1, but it was not really a great handgun, just kind of a cool handgun that was in Fallout 1. In Fallout 2, it would remain exactly the same as it was in Fallout 1, although this time you didn't get it early on like you did in Fallout 1. You got this one probably later on into Fallout 2, like mid-game. It had the same exact stats as it did in Fallout 1, just 9mm rounds you could buy in different areas. It wasn't good, it wasn't very strong, but it was a gun that stuck around. In Fallout Tactics, the Mauser would actually appear once again, this time actually not being called the 9mm Mauser. This time it was called the HSI Mauser. So, still a Mauser pistol. This one was also chambered in 9mm, also held 7 shots. This one had relatively low stats, although it had pretty long range, which was kind of nice. And it did have okay enough stats for the start of Fallout Tactics, since it did 6 to 14 damage, so it did get buffed from Fallout 1 and 2, as well as 9mm became really common in Fallout Tactics since there wasn't a 10mm in that one, so that was probably the most common handgun round. Unfortunately, there were still better handguns, particularly you start out with Berettas on your characters, and they actually just do 8 to 15 damage, so they do higher minimum and higher maximum damage, as well as they also have the ability to be fired in burst, as opposed to the Mauser, which is semi-auto only. So it kind of got outcompeted right at the very start, and I think you could get these in a couple of places in Fallout Tactics, but I mean, even after the first mission, these were kind of outdated, so you didn't really use them there either. It was kind of a cool throwback to weapons like this in the Fallout games, but wasn't really that great even in this game, where a lot of other weapons could be a whole lot better. In Fallout 3, the Mauser would once again make an appearance, this time as the Chinese pistol, and that's kind of where it got its name and why it was kind of associated with the Chinese. Now, sadly, the Chinese pistol in Fallout 3 was also really bad. It did worse than the 10mm at basically everything, and once again, you started out with the 10mm in Fallout 3. So it did less damage per second, it held less bullets, it was less accurate. The only thing it did better was that it had a whole lot more durability to it, and it weighed slightly less than the 10mm pistol by 1. It also used the 10mm round now, rather than the 9mm that it had used all the way up to this point, which I don't know of a Mauser that was chambered in 10mm, but that would be cool, and I don't think it would have a problem shooting that, honestly. The Mauser's pretty durable, at least in terms of its design. It's kind of over-engineered like a lot of German stuff is. There was also one unique variant of the Chinese pistol in Fallout 3 as well that was called the Zhurong V418 Chinese pistol. And this one was kind of cool, but it was still pretty bad, since this one was a fire weapon. Every bullet actually did fire damage on it, which did 2 damage over the course of 5 seconds. 2 damage per second for 5 seconds. So it did better damage than something like the regular Chinese pistol, and it could at least outcompete like the standard 10mm pistol then in terms of damage per bullet, I guess. But it still wasn't that great, and sadly the Pyromaniac perk didn't work for this one for some reason. Granted, that wouldn't have given it that much more damage, because that's 50% more damage, but when your damage is literally 2, it's not going to be a whole lot more. Even if they counted the regular base damage of 4 and you added the 2, so you'd have 6, you're still only getting like an additional 3 damage to it. So at that point, it's barely matching the 10mm pistol for base amounts of damage. It's a cool gun, but sadly it's not very good in Fallout 3, and would just not really have that much of a use. In Fallout New Vegas, funny enough, the Chinese pistol was technically in the game, even in the base game, but you couldn't use it. Same thing goes with the Chinese assault rifle and like the railway rifle. If you went into Mick and Ralph's shop in Freeside and asked to see their special selection of weapons, you could see all of these weapons up on display there. There was a Chinese pistol, there was a Chinese assault rifle, and there was like a railway rifle, as well as a few other guns that were just in the back. Those were just placeholders pretty much. You couldn't actually clip through there and grab them or anything, and there wasn't really a model for them to be used in the game, even though they could have just ported them from Fallout 3 like they did with a couple other guns from that game. Into Fallout 4, there was actually no Chinese pistols that were added, funny enough. There wasn't really a whole lot of talk of Chinese weapons in Fallout 4, even though you can do like the submarine mission there, which I guess is about the only one that I can really think of that's in Fallout 4 that directly ties it to the Chinese. Fallout 76 also didn't have the Chinese pistol, even though I haven't played Fallout 76. It didn't have that either. However, Fallout London did actually have the Chinese pistol, and it was called the Chinese pistol, or the Chinese submachine gun, or the Chinese carbine, because in Fallout London you could actually modify this a lot. It was still a Mauser C96, and it was probably the best modeled version of the C96. This was based off of a mod for Fallout 4, and it worked actually quite well in that game because they gave it so many options for upgrades. And the way the upgrade system worked in Fallout London was actually kind of nice to see, as opposed to what it did in Fallout 4, where it could kind of make sense if you wanted to upgrade this in a couple of ways, where you could put different muzzle brakes on this, you could put a full stock and grip on this and turn it into the Mauser carbine, which is pretty cool because those actually did exist too. They were used in small amounts in like World War I, but they did exist there, and you could have extended magazines on this, to where you could have, I think in London, you could either have a 10 round, 20 round, 30 round, or 40 round magazine. You could make this semi-auto or full auto, which would also be accurate to the gun. I don't know if magazines actually went that big for the Mauser. There was like 15 and 20 round magazines I'm aware, and probably 30 rounds. I'm not sure about 40 rounds though. I don't know if they actually went quite that big. As well as there were stocks to the Mauser C96 pistol too. That would be completely accurate. There was quite a few different ones. One of them was actually the holster itself, where the holster was made out of wood and it was hollow in the inside. You could put the gun inside of it to holster it, and then you could take it off and attach it to the back of the weapon itself. So really cool gun, and it's really cool that it's been in so many of the Fallout games. Sadly, it's never really been that good outside of like Fallout London, which isn't an official Fallout game, but in like Fallout 1 it was pretty bad, Fallout 2 it was really bad. Tactics, it got outcompeted right away. Same thing goes with 1 and 2. Same thing goes in 3. Like the 10mm outcompeted it. New Vegas, it was basically just a placeholder there. Didn't show up at all in 4. I thought this would be a fun one to talk about because it's a really cool gun. It's a really cool design, and it shows up in so many other games. You see it all throughout various World War I, World War II games. You see it in some Old West games, like the Red Dead Redemption games have Mausers in them as well, which is pretty awesome, which actually fits the time period. Since again, this is like late 1800s that this thing is being made. You see it in other games like Hunt Showdown, which is another Old West game, as well as you also see it in futuristic games and movies. Like it's Han Solo's gun from Star Wars. It's also showed up in like the Wolfenstein games, which makes a lot of sense too. Just kind of souped up and looks a little bit different. But yeah, a really cool gun that's been in so much pop culture, been in so many things, and sadly has pretty much always been awful in the Fallout games. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye.